Good morning, folks. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. Hi, everyone. As you know, my name is Lewis, and I am here with the BoSTEM initiative with United Way of Massachusetts Bay, Merrimack Valley, and we are super excited to have another STEM chat session here with you. Today, we have a special guest joining us from a company that's really new to the STEM family. This person is going to share with us all about his experience in the postdoctoral world. Studying at university is a really serious thing. And so here today, we're going to ask our special guest about what it's like to pursue such a career trajectory. So with me today is Chris Morrow. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Luis.
Chris, please let us know where you are tuning in from, what you are doing, and how do you see STEM to be important in your life?
Yes. So I'm currently a postdoctoral fellow at the Harvard School of Public Health, working in Will Maer's lab. And in the Maer lab, we study aging using worms. And we use worms because they have a really rapid life cycle. So we can observe their whole life in the matter of just a couple of weeks as compared to a human where that would take about 100 years. And we look for things that change with age and then try to see if we manipulate those things can make a worm live a longer or shorter life or a healthier or less healthy life. Should
Cool.
I now give background on who I am? Or
No, that's great. That's great. Thank you so much. So students, I just want to back up a little bit. So if you're just joining in or if you're new to our STEM chat series, Chris is just mentioning about his work in the postdoctoral world in cell biology, specifically worms and aging. So just to kind of summarize what you shared there, but please let's hear more. So what do you do on a day-to-day basis, Chris? Are you considered a STEM professional? Are you working or are you a student?
I guess I'm kind of in that limbo of not quite professional, not quite student. So I just finished graduate school about 6 months ago, and I'm now transitioned to a postdoctoral position, which is kind of one step before becoming a professor or transitioning into other facets of careers that I would be suited for as a cell biologist.
Mhm.
So my day to day now, I'm definitely not a student and I don't go to class, but I'm still in an academic setting. So I work side by side with a lot of graduate students, professors, and I basically come into the lab and I have a set of state of the art tools for any cell biologist dream, such as worms and taking all these different tools we have for looking at what's inside a worm, really fancy microscopes for looking closely at a worm, or different materials that we have for measuring different aspects of a worm within their cells. And then I set up experiments to try and probe what's happening to those worms as they're aging, or if we change the rate at which they age.
Awesome. Awesome. Chris, I mean, it's a really specific kind of focus in the cell biology world. My question to you is, did you know that you were going to be doing this work when you were a child?
Yeah, I'd say probably not really. I think the reason that I got into this field isn't necessarily so eloquent. I was applying for schools and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I did a lot of internships while I was a high school student and really didn't like a lot of the things that I tried. Just found that a lot of careers seemed a bit boring to me. And what happened was I applied for undergraduate schools. I went and then I got a little bit of extra money to be a biochemistry major. So I decided to just start with that, take the extra money and see what happens. And then I spent a summer in a lab in my undergraduate institution. And it was just the first work that I did that I found to be really exciting to me, really fulfilling. And so I stuck with it. And that's kind of how I got to where I am today. And, honestly, I think it might sound a bit like it just happened by chance, but I think more often than not, people's trajectories as I talk to them seem to be something like that, where you just kind of keep fumbling around until you stumble into something that you really enjoy. So I think for people, just going through high school or even earlier that aren't so sure about what they want to do, don't worry about it too much. There's almost an argument for not overthinking it, you might say.
Very, very true. I mean, so Chris, it's pretty apparent that like this was something that you kind of discovered along the way. What would be, thinking back on your academics, what do you think would be like that spark, or like what were some of those classes that you were sitting in? It was like, I really like this.
Mm. I'd say I definitely always leaned a bit more towards the STEM subjects just from the empirical nature of them. Um, I really liked math and science. I think that's also what drew me to those subjects as I was thinking about what to study in my undergraduate career. Um, I don't necessarily know how to expand on it more than that.
Hmm. Really, really cool. I mean, I asked that question, Chris, because it has me thinking about, your inclination or your interest in the lab space or working on experiments. I know that some students might love you know, um, the STEM academics, but then as soon as they walk into a lab, they're like so overwhelmed, they're so confused, they're like all these different tools, and it's like a whole new world that they have to learn. So that's really helpful to hear that, it really is just being a part of that community and helping to move that one piece or body of knowledge. I mean, that's really powerful. I mean, so would you kind of consider yourself working mostly alone, or do you think that you work more in teams or collaborate with different departments or other scientists or postdoctoral students as well?
I'd say it's probably a nice healthy mix. And it kind of there's different facets of what I do that can be more individual or more team oriented.
Hmm.
So the lab that I work in, or the way that an academic lab is or institution is structured as far as research is, you'll have professors that act as what you call a principal investigator that will bring in people to support the missions of their laboratory. So my boss is a professor at the School of Public Health at Harvard that hires a bunch of postdoctoral fellows like myself, graduate students. You can also hire staff scientists, lab managers, undergraduates, even high school students to come in and all work under the umbrella of what our lab focuses on. So the lab has this common set of tools, and then everybody brings their own special piece of who they are to apply that to what the lab has and try and advance the lab's missions. Right. So I guess feeding into that, you have a lot of people. Our lab has about 15 people or so in total. It's about a 50-50 split of graduate students to postdocs. And there are a lot of projects that I work on with other people, and also a lot of projects that I have that I largely work on my own. However, I guess what I should say is maybe how it's all structured is that everybody has kind of their own thing that they're primarily working on. Because to advance in our field, you really have to have something that you can call your own, that you can claim that you are the primary intellectual driver of. But then we also like to help each other out, both just by talking over an experiment at lunch or a project at lunch, try and get guidance, or with actual hands and labor. So generally what will happen is people will work on their own and try and find an interesting line of research to pursue. And then as they start to develop that idea and they have a lot more work that they have to do, they
Hmm.
can get help from people around the lab to give additional hands to that project to make it move along a bit faster. And, I think that reflecting back on all the projects that I worked on in graduate school, I just haven't been a postdoc that long. I think it's actually really cool that none of the ideas or none of the papers that I published really were just the idea of one person. Looking back on all these papers, they really were a large team effort. So there is a lot of opportunity to work with others.
Hmm. I love that flexibility. Like you said, there's a little bit of alone time to kind of problem solve or test your skills, and then, coming together with other folks to kind of really say, hey, I got stuck. I don't know how to move forward. That's huge because the students are doing that in the classroom. And I know sometimes working in groups or in pairs might be a little awkward or just confusing because you're like, but I understand this. Why do I have to work with, someone else? Or maybe saying, oh my gosh, like I really can't get through this. Maybe I should ask for help. I think that's a skill that translates both in the classroom and as we're seeing with your experience in the lab space as well, which is I think really powerful for students to kind of grasp. We talked a lot about your day to day, Chris. I'm really thinking about what kind of motivated you to kind of make this decision or propel you into a postdoctoral study? And Harvard University has a really, strong reputation, and so it leads me to think about some of our students who might want to, follow in your footsteps. They have Harvard University as their, top five schools that they want to attend after high school. What was that moment for you, or that influential piece of advice or person? What was just that moment, that spark that made you kind of commit to that decision to pursue a postdoctoral study?
Yeah. I often joke with friends and family that my primary career motivation is to continue to do something interesting. Um, So I think that, there's a lot of ways that you could think about what kind of value you want to pull out of a career, or how to choose the optimal career. For me, I like to be engaged in my work. That can mean a ton of different things, including but not limited to interest. I also think that it's ideal if a career is actually making a positive benefit in the world. So as a scientist, I have the opportunity to help contribute to these basic science advances that very further downstream can be translated to improving human health. And then I think, so a postdoctoral fellow position really is a transitional position that kind of falls in this academic career trajectory, or not. Actually, most postdoctoral fellows will end up leaving academia for other career paths that are suitable for someone like me. There's really a lot of options, and I think really my primary motivation for accepting this position was that I really enjoyed the type of growth that I had as a individual and professional in graduate school, which doing a postdoc, it's kind of like an extension of graduate school, just without the formal coursework and committees that you have to meet with. You're kind of doing the same thing in a research sense, where you're just carrying out projects, trying to make science advances, publish papers, and then use that to continue developing your career. And so I think it's just one part that I really like, growth that I have in this type of position. And also I'm still a bit flexible in how I can pivot on my next step. So there's a lot of options open to, so in graduate school, I got a PhD in pharmacology. And there's a lot of options open to someone with that type of credential, lots of ways you can use that skill set you have. And so I'm still very much not in my like final form of career per se, but there's a lot of options on the table. And I think that also motivated me for this position.
Yeah, no, it's really, really cool just to kind of know that there's so many endless possibilities as you're pursuing your goal or just target, I think is really powerful. Students, if you're listening, I think Chris is getting at a point that's really critical here. I mean, if you're a STEM student that, you consider yourself a scholar or an honor in the STEM fields, consider a postgraduate study. I think this is something that would definitely elevate you, not only in academics, but I think professionally as well. I mean, as Chris is mentioning, so many endless possibilities to just one degree or type of credential, which I think is really exciting for students who are already locked in at an early age on this career pathway. Chris, one of my last few questions to you is thinking about some of the interests or abilities or skills that some students can really like hunker down on or really try to exercise now so that they can, be as successful as they can be in your current occupation or field of study. What do you think would be helpful for students to really focus in on, whether it be a class or a particular skill?
Hmm. Well, I think you definitely have to take a biology, chemistry, physics class and at least find some amount of joy in that. There are a lot of parts of my job that can be very stressful. So if you don't enjoy the subject, then it's really probably not worth it. But I think, trying some of those basic courses to see if that would be something that would interest you is probably the best first step. And then, if there are ways to try and get involved, I think I see my job it's almost as important that as quickly as possible disprove myself as I prove myself. So when you're thinking about different career paths, such as considering academic science, it's really to your benefit to, as quickly as you can, determine if that career path is good for you. And if it's not, that's great. But the sooner you figure out, the better, so you can more quickly figure out what you do want to do. And so I think to assist in that, just taking any opportunity you have, such as watching this video or taking these courses or trying to reach out to other academic scientists to either just chat with them to see what they like or don't like about their job, or there are a lot of programs out there that can allow, I think even as early as high school students, to come in and work in academic labs to just get a tiny taste of what that's like. And I think in addition to seeing if you like the style of work, I think that something that I don't think my mentors as I was growing up did a poor job of, but just something that I struggled to see when I was younger, is just to think really about the reality of that job when you're older. So, there are so many different types of jobs in the world, and they vary in many, many ways, mostly probably based on topic. But I think there's this axis that I didn't really consider until, maybe even graduate school, where your life is a finite number of hours, and there are careers where you might spend a relatively higher number of those hours at work. There are careers where you might spend a relatively lower number of hours at work, and it just kind of shapes how you live your life. No career is necessarily good or bad. It's just a very personalized decision, I'd say. And even within my field, there are jobs that can meet any ratio of work to play per se that you might like. And I think that, also the sooner you can figure out things like that, like, are you somebody that really wants to invest a lot of time in their career, or are you somebody that really wants to stay in the same town as your family or close to family? I think these things are really important filters to consider early on that can really set you up for a much more fulfilling career down the road.
Wow, very, very insightful. Students, I mean, definitely our older students can resonate with that. I mean, I think they're sitting with some of those decisions or haven't even had thought to those types of questions. So thank you so, so much, Chris, for bringing that up. Students, I hope that you're finding some value in today's share. Chris is a postdoctoral student at Harvard University talking about cell biology. So if you're just tuning in, you are in for a treat. Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing everything so far. As we're nearing the end of our time together, Chris, I just want to kind of end with some advice for some of our students. We've been giving special attention to our students who are focusing in the STEM field and wanting to pursue STEM careers, but we also want to give attention to those students who have interest in the STEM fields, but don't necessarily see themselves as a scientist per se, as an engineer, but want to be a part of the innovation, want to be a part of that, kind of problem solving team. So what kind of advice would you give to students who don't consider themselves STEM scholars, but are really interested in working at a STEM company? What kind of advice would you give those students?
Mm. Um, well, I guess, I may be a little bit less familiar with these types of positions, but what I can say is, any company, whether it be academic or industry, um, is going to have or is going to require a certain structure, right? So, I'm a scientist, but there also are teams of HR professionals and people that have to keep our facility clean or sit at the desk out front. So there really, I'd say, are endless numbers of ways to be involved or be proximal to the type of work that I'm doing. Um, and I think that this advice really is as old as time, and I'm sure that it won't be the first time that many people have heard it. But I think the best way to facilitate any career transition is just to increase your network. So I think if you have something that you are really interested in, just start reaching out to people. And maybe you have a 98% rejection rate, or not rejection, but 98% of the people just ghost you and don't write you back. But maybe one person does, and maybe that person ends up helping you get to that career. There's this really crazy entity that we call science Twitter on our field, which is just a lot of scientists that are active on Twitter, talking about what their life is like. And there's been a lot of craziness that's come out of it. But I think one thing that I've really enjoyed is that a lot of people have started demystifying a lot of these very obscure processes that I think are all tied around success. And I think what I mean by this and why I think it's important is that when you look at any given person in their career, you're getting a really biased view of that person. You're seeing, oh, they successfully made it that career, they have X, Y, and Z award. What you're not seeing is that they got that one position, but they got rejected from 25 positions. You're not seeing that they won that one really prestigious award, but they got rejected from 100. So it's very normal, I think, to fail or have that trial and tribulation type trajectory to get to where you're going. And I think it's really important just to be resilient, not take things too personally, and maybe at the same time try to not overthink it. Just go
Mhm.
with your gut, in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, beautifully said. So much to take away there. Students, I hope that, you find some value in today's discussion. I know I for sure did. Talking with you today, Chris, it definitely gives me another a rejuvenated sense of hope for our students that there are tons of opportunity. It makes me jealous almost to kind of say, wow, I wish I had, a resource like this STEM chat to kind of hear from folks in the STEM fields. But thank you so, so much for taking the time out to join us. Thank you, students, for taking the time to tune in. We know how important it is to have access to resources like this, so please continue to share the word with your friends, colleagues, other educators about our STEM chat. sessions, and of course the other virtual opportunities that the BoSTEM Initiative here at United Way has available. But again, special thanks to you, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us. I know that you have tons of other stuff to do, but taking the time to share your story with students is so appreciated by the BoSTEM family, and I hope that you can feel that.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Lewis.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Like I mentioned, if you would like to stay connected with myself or want to know more about Chris's story or the work happening at Harvard University, feel free to reach out to your educator. They can connect you to me and also Chris, and we can kind of continue the conversation offline. Otherwise, we'll see you at a future STEM chat session. Thank you so much for tuning in, and have a great rest of the day.